Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy, Tokahan Sleep Strong, and I'm back with a new series about the history of all the cannabis strains and where they come from. Join me on this journey. Let's discover where these cannabis strains originate, and also, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Let's get into this, YouTube. Let's go. So, YouTube, I'm sure you're curious and asking yourself, like, what strain am I going to pick? What will I start off with? What will the great Tokahantas do? And what we're gonna choose. Okay. I know we have a lot of choices, but what we're gonna do here is we're gonna pick something that's way out of left field. Okay, we're gonna go with OG Kush. Yes, sir. So let's get. Our history of OG Kush begins in the rugged Hindu Kush mountains of northeastern Afghanistan, homeland of the world's finest hashish. Legendary Afghan Primo was created by sieving crushed dry cannabis, a technique well developed to the arid and often cold climates along the temperate southwestern fringe of Central Asia. During the 1960s and 70s, many adventurous wanderers passed through Afghanistan as they followed the Hippie Trail from Europe to India. By the time Westerners reached the region, landrace hashish varieties had been grown and processed with traditional techniques for generations, and both the farmers and their crops were well adapted to the arid alpine conditions. Travelers familiar with cannabis plants growing in other regions soon realized that the Afghan varieties looked different. Shorter plants with broad, dark green leaflets and stout branches supporting denser and leafier inflorescence, covered with copious resin glands that sparkled in the earthy, dank, and skunky smelling when compared to the other herbal, spicy, floral, and somewhat fruity aromas of the 1970s. Marijuana smokers were learning to relish and uh, enjoy the varieties from the Hindu Kush, formed a class by themselves. From the late 1960s into the early 1980s, travelers and smugglers brought seeds of this amazing new hash plant home, and the first domestically grown Afghan cannabis sprang up in Western gardens. These early homegrowers were already familiar with New World landrace varieties such as Colombian, Jamaican, Mexican, along with the Old World Indian, Nepali, Thai, and even African. The biodiversity of introduced land races was at its zenith. The traditional Sensimilita varieties were imported from subtropical latitudes and most matured later in autumn than was practical across most of temperate North America. Many plants succumbed to winter frost before they could fully mature. All these early Sensimilla landraces share the common traits of taller growth with narrow, light to medium green leaflets spaced along longer branches with lax inflorescences, within which resin gland production was largely limited to flower bracts rather than being shared by the small leaflets. These early narrow leaflet landraces produced an array of fragrances and flavors that enhanced and modified a comparably diverse array of enjoyable and potentially therapeutic effects, but they often produced only small amounts of potent flowers. By the early 1970s, crosses between these imported landraces had begun to yield improved narrow leaflet hybrid varieties grown from seed that had larger and more potent flowers than their predecessors. These gained popularity quickly, and by the end of the decade, potent and flavorful narrow leaflet hybrids like Original Haze and Kona Gold had become legendary in their own right. Most early domestic Afghan growers kept their coveted hash plant seeds close to them, but eventually the seeds were spread far and wide by the late 1970s. They were rapidly gaining popularity in isolated regions across North America. Afghan land races expressed several key agronomic traits that were advantageous to Prohibition era outdoor Sinsemilla growers. The most economically favorable traits included short stature, early maturation, and enhanced resin gland production. Hybrids between the recently introduced Afghan varieties and a wide range of extant narrow leaflet land races produced some spectacular results. Earlier maturing, vigorous plants yielded heaps of dense, pungent, and potent flowers. Really, what more could a grower want? As the war on drugs was heating up, growers sought refuge indoors under lights. Traditional, later maturing, tall and sparse, narrow leaflet sinsemilla varieties proved challenging to grow indoors, and shorter, faster maturing hashish plants with dense flowers offered a seemingly perfect solution. Hashish cross sinsemilla hybrids paired with high intensity lighting became the unstoppable force that spread urban cannabis cultivation worldwide. This is where the modern OG Kush story begins. The OG Kush lineage is a product of Prohibition era indoor cultivation. In the 1990s, Florida resident Matt Bubba Berger grew a Northern Lights cutting he would later dub Bubba, after the term of endearment bestowed upon him by his grandmother. Berger also acquired a local Floridian favorite known as Crippy, or Supernut, from local grower Alec Anderson. As the story goes, Crippy was renamed Kush after a friend of Berger's claimed the dense, colorful round buds looked like something he called Kush berries, with no apparent knowledge of the important impact of Hindu Kush land races on traditional sinsemilla varieties. And it is entirely possible that the name Kush was subconsciously associated with cannabis. Most likely, the Northern Lights-based variety Bubba parent was more closely related to a true Afghan Hindu Kush land race than that would eventually become the famous OG Kush colonial variety. For years, Kush remained a well-kept secret shared within an insular community of Florida growers. It had not gained its now international fame until it was smuggled to LA and placed in the hands of Josh D, whose name has become synonymous with the modern-day OG Kush clone. Josh D became the guiding force who ultimately perfected the cultivation techniques required to grow this agronomically challenging plant. OG Kush is not an easy plant to grow. It is sensitive to light and nutrient levels, susceptible to pests, and when stressed, produces a few male flowers and accidental seeds. Dashi shared his cuttings and knowledge with numerous friends and growers who would eventually spread OG Kush cuttings around the world. Though the primary origins and lineages of OG Kush heritage are still shrouded in mystery, its terpene profile and intense effects suggest it is closely related to many other Afghan varieties with which it shares some advantageous and some deleterious traits. Because it spontaneously develops occasional male flowers, resulting in self-pollinated seeds, and the resulting offspring are remarkably similar to the OG Kush parent cutting, the inbred Kush family also accidentally spread through the flower cells. The intense aroma of OG Kush became such a marketing tool that many aspiring Sinsemilla breeders could not resist crossing their varieties with OG Kush in order to capitalize on the burgeoning demand for extremely flavorful flowers. While focusing solely on fragrance, potency, and retail appearance, many breeders unconsciously encouraged and proliferated some of Afghan's much less desirable traits as well. The most detrimental of all these traits include extreme susceptibility to molds, mildews, and other economically and threatening pests. Members of the highly prized Kush family of hybrid Sinsemilla cuttings are all distant relatives of hashish landrace imported from Afghanistan, and they all express many favorable parental traits from both their broad leaflet Afghan and narrow leaflet non-Afghan ancestors. The traditional pre-Afghan hybrids were descendants of narrow leaflet landraces that mostly originated in semi-tropical climates and over time had evolved natural resistance to a variety of pests, especially fungi. Traditional seed-grown narrow leaflet varieties matured late in autumn and often endured cold fog and drizzly rain without developing a touch of gray mold, and the mildew so common today were rarely seen on cannabis crops. Pre-Afghan varieties were susceptible to few pests and diseases, and rare infestations usually remain isolated. On the other hand, Afghan land races originate in a dry climate with few fungi, providing scant evolutionary pressure to develop resistance to fungal infection and resulting in populations that proved highly susceptible to fungal attack. Indoor grow room and greenhouse atmospheres are often considered more humid than the outside air, and when varieties of Afghan heritage are grown indoors, they are most often compromised by pests and pathogens. This susceptibility are often proven to be a dominant trait in present-day hybrids and OG Kush and its relatives within the Kush family, as well as most other modern-day drug cannabis hybrids, whether rich in THC, CBD, or both, have inherited this economically threatening trait. Today, susceptibility to these pests can result in catastrophic crop losses that would prove to be unsustainable in a normalized agricultural cannabis industry. So that's going to be the story of how OG Kush came about YouTube. That's going to end it for today. We done with another video, back at it again. You know what I'm saying? We're going to do this again next week for y'all. Another video on this topic, another video on the history of cannabis. I really appreciate y'all for making it to the end of the video. Y'all got all the love, homies, all the love, my gromies. You feel me? Y'all have a wonderful day. Appreciate y'all. Peace.